Bet. All right. Hold up. Take care of some business real quick. All right. Think we good. I think we good. Hold on. Where my headphones at? Let me see. Just want to make sure sounds is right. Everything sound lit. Bet. Alright. Let's get it popping. Cause this is gonna be this one's gonna be one for the comfortable people. So if you chilling, or if you're doing something, you listen to the voice. But if you chilling with me, I'm gonna take this walk with me. Sit back, relax, and let's do this. So phase one's about over. A lot of retrospects and reviews are coming out. I might give my own little review video later. I don't know. I feel a lot of times I feel like if a lot of people are doing it, I agree with the situation. I generally don't have anything to add, so there's no real need for me to put a retrospective of phase one now. But who knows? We'll see. But phase one's ending. We're looking ahead at phase two. Phase two is what? 2 weeks away. Let me double check the calendar. Looking ahead at phase two. Yeah, like a little bit less than 2 weeks away actually. So obviously with that you're probably gonna have tier lists and stuff come out, and as the title suggests, this is all speculative. I did the same thing in phase one where before SOD released, I did a speculative phase one tier for tanks, healers, and did I do DPS? I don't remember if I did DPS. I don't think I did. Normally I really don't. But today I'm doing the same thing, but I'm combining it. I'm combining tanks and healers because at first I was just going to do tanks, and I was going to do healers for a separate stream, but I figured, you know what, why not? I'm kind of celebrating the 800 sub milestone thing, so I was like, you know what, let's just combine them. Let's do it. Let's get comfortable. Let's talk about everything under the sun, and we're going to get to it. I am basing my tiering on this and my opinions off a couple of factors, really basing it off of how they performed in phase one. Oh shit, can you hear that? Oh my bad. What is going on? You know, that sometimes happens. Thank you, Kenneth, for the heads up. Oh, I already know what happens. Hold on, let me fix that right quick. Hold on. Thank you, Kenneth. I already know what time it is. Heads up. Oh, I already know what happened. Wow. My bad if there was a double audio. I had one of the settings messed up in the OBS from my last stream. Oh. There we go. Bet. Treyu was popping, my guy. It's popping, Treyu. Thanks for pulling up. That's your real name. That's not your real name. You lying. That's a government name. Yo, somebody check him. Somebody check him. Somebody check him. He's a government agent, guys, and he's rich. So make sure you go see where he at. But anyway, nah, it's my guy. But anyway, I did the same thing with phase one. I'm doing the same thing phase two, combining the tanks and the healers, basing it off of their performance in phase one, both really in BFD, but kind of in dungeons too. Not really in PvP. Don't really care about that. And the nerfs that they got, the buffs that they got, what pretty much the community is agreeing on the runes that they're going to get. There's a whole lot of factors, but I've been thinking about it a lot. I have a couple of notes here that I'm going to go over, and we're going to rock it out. So, as you can see here, I don't have the traditional, S, A, B, C, D tier. I have tiers that have different names because I'm going to try to add a little bit more context than just a generic, this is good, this is bad, because I truly think that Blizzard is at least attempting to do a balanced version of each healer and each tank. And we saw that, right? Like in SOD, they're not scared to do hot fixes and changes to runes and classes, which is something we really didn't see in Season of Mastery. We really didn't see too much of it in TBC Classic or Wrath Classic. Like we saw little things here and there. We saw glyph changes, which was cool. We saw legendary changes, which was cool. They increased the item level, obviously, on Old War, which was kind of a big thing. But we didn't really see any balancing changes when it came to classes, right? Like, as an example, like Death Knights didn't get a 10% damage increase, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, we didn't see anything like that. So Blizzard has shown that they're not shying away from balance changes, and honestly, I'm kind of for it. Like, I think that's probably one of the things that people wanted to see in Season of Discovery was that they didn't want the meta to stay the same. And Blizzard said, they came up with that bullshit. Like, people who use the same classes that they did in Vanilla Classic aren't going to get ahead, and we clearly saw that was a lie. So I'm glad Blizzard is taking the steps to actually do balancing hotfixes, but that's kind of what I'm basing it off of. So let's get started. So basically, top dog, no Kendrick. If you know, I'm just making a little joke, but basically that's the prospected top spec for Phase 2, based off of what we saw in Phase 1, what we think they're going to get in Phase 2, and so on and so forth. And then the A tier would be Platinum with no features, B all around decent, C is Pug Champs, but it's not like I don't want C and D tiers to like get negative connotations, because a lot of people see those and think they're just useless, and that's not really the case. And then I have what will be the lowest tier, needs a buff, which is just things that I think need buffs. But let's start out with the tanks. Let's start off with top. Let's start with Druid, because I think Druid was really unsung, the Bear Druid. I'm honestly going to start with them in the need the buff category. More often than not, if you have a Druid, you have it for Pharaoh, because Pharaoh's actually doing pretty decent. And like the 75th to 85th percentile, like on Warcraft logs, Pharaoh DPS does pretty well. Resto Druids do pretty well. But Bear Druids are kind of unsung. And I think a large part of it was because Blizzard kind of they buffed their rage cost. They reduced the rage cost of Lacerate and Mangle. I think they did that a little too late. If they would have did that earlier on when people were still gearing up in SOD, it would have mattered more, in my opinion. And I'm going to have that stance kind of for a couple of things that we go over, that I think they either changed things a little too late or changed things a little too early. They should let it stretch out. But I think that was a thing that they kind of rested on their laurels on. And the meta already kind of shaped around that. Like, Warlock was pretty much the premier tank for BFD. So was Paladin. Paladin was pretty strong too. But Druids, they had such a big rage cost on their rune abilities that it really was hindering their single target threat. Not saying that they couldn't tank. Obviously they can tank, right? And I even said in my Phase 1 speculative tier list that I think Druids are the best defensive tank, because they have a lot of armor. They have just as much armor, probably more, than they do with Warlocks. And they have the Survival of the Fittest rune, which reduces their damage taken by 10%, right? In bear form, right? So I think defensively they were really strong, but defensively it doesn't really matter when the raid isn't that hard. BFD wasn't really a hard raid, even with pre-nerf Kelris, before they even nerfed Kelris. It wasn't really a hard raid. So defensive power only goes so far when you really need it, right? So even in, like, maybe you could say gearing up, it makes it a little bit easier to have a Bear Druid, but that gearing up process only really lasts so long. That's like, you're looking at, especially on a raid that's a 3-day lockout, you're looking at max 1 to 2 weeks. That's 4 resets. So the gearing up process really isn't that long. So defensive power only takes you so far. Now we're looking at, all right, can you do the threat? Can you do the DPS? Can we speed clear? Can we do all these other factors? And unfortunately, we saw that Druids were just having really bad rage issues with their runes. So it was tough for Druids in the beginning. And I even think even after the nerf came, I think Druids still need kind of a buff. Like they don't. So Druids' niche in Season of Mastery and in Vanilla Classic was that they were the best single target threat tank. They can out threat warrior tanks. They could keep threat above all of the other DPS because number one, they could generate rage while not tanking. Number two, Mangle and Maul were just better versions of Heroic Strike and, you know, their auto attacks and stuff like that. So Druids were the best at single target threat. That niche has kind of been taken by Warlocks. Warlocks are the best single target threat tank. By and large, I don't even think it's close in BFD. If you think I'm lying, just all you gotta do is look at the Warcraft log sheets on like Gamera, the turtle boss, and you'll see that Warlock tanks, and I mean that one's kind of an asterisk because he does take increased damage from magic and stuff like that. So that one's a little bit of an asterisk, but you'd be hard pressed on every other tank to hold threat off of like a Warlock, a DPS Warlock, without having a Warlock tank on that fight. Like Warlock tanks are just the best single target threat tank. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's not unfortunate because I main Warlock, so I don't think it's unfortunate, but it's unfortunate for the Druid because that was their thing, right? That was their thing. Yeah, they can't really use items without power shifting. They didn't really have good cooldowns. Like Frenzy Regen was trash, and Barkskin was on the GCD, so you have to shift out of bear form, wait for the GCD, and then go back, which means you're dead because you're taking the auto attack while not in bear form. You're probably dead. So Barkskin and Frenzy Regen were bad cooldowns, and they didn't really compare to Last Stand and Shield Wall anyway. So you had that issue. So their saving grace was we have a lot of armor, we have a lot of health, we do the best single target threat. And they still have a lot of armor, they still have a lot of health. They don't do the best single target threat. And with their armor, again, Warlocks are comparable to that. Health-wise, they might get the edge on health, but I think Druids definitely need a buff. Now, what form that buff comes in? Maybe increasing the Primal Fury talent, which increases their rage generation from crits. Who knows? And I don't want to make it doom and gloom on Druids because they are getting some pretty good things come phase 2. I think I have it up somewhere here. If not, I'll just make one real quick. But they are getting some pretty good things come phase 2. Leader of the Pack is a pretty good talent, especially when you combine Leader of the Pack and the Wild Strikes rune. So now you're providing not only the Wind Fury effect, you're also providing 3% crit to melee boys, and they're going to love you. That's also going to go further for your own threat generation. So it's not all doom and gloom for Druids. Let me put it up real quick so you can see. Oh, I didn't save it. All right, let me just build out this talent tree real quick. Right now, what I'm doing off screen is I'm building up a talent tree. Not like a super perfect one. This is just, I'm putting talents in just so you can see as a point of reference. You probably shouldn't use this talent build at all, to be quite honest. I just put random talents in. So let's pull this over here. And you can clearly see, so this is what your talents might look like. Again, this is random talents. You don't want to use this. But this is level 40. They get Leader of the Pack. Like I said, 3% crit to party members, plus the Wind Fury effect. It's going to be really good. And then when you go down, you can see all of the things they get at level 40, or leading up to level 40 is what I should say. Pardon me. So when it comes to the bear form, obviously I think the most important thing is dire bear form, right? Dire bear form is the next big power jump for Druid tanks. It effectively makes you equivalent to like plate wearers. That was like kind of the equivalency factor. Warriors and Paladins get plate at 40. Druids get dire bear form. So it increases your armor. It still increases your attack power too, and it increases your health. So dire bear form is one of the big power spikes you get. Definitely. I'm pretty sure they get another rank of Maul. I'm trying to find it. They get Swipe too, but Swipe is so trash. They need to buff Swipe. If they're going to buff something, buff Swipe. Buff Swipe. Because even at the 40 bracket, I'm trying to think, Strathholm drops an idol from Barthalos, I think his name is. And that idol is really, really good for Maul and Swipe damage. But you can't really go to Strathholm at 40. I mean, I don't think you can. And even if you could, that item is probably high item level. I think, what is it called? Idol of Brute or something. Let me see if I can find it. Idol of Brutality, maybe? Hey, yo, look at me. Yeah, it reduces the rage cost of Maul and Swipe by 3, which is big. If they could get access to something like this early on, it'd be great. Obviously, if you look at this, requires level 60, so it's clips for them on getting that at the 40 bracket. But if they can get something like this, if there's a new idol in Nomergon that can assist with this, I think Druids will be good. I thought that I could have swore they got another rank of Maul. Maybe I'm tripping. Maybe I just, oh no, they do. Yeah, they get a rank 4 Maul. Boom. So they get another rank of Maul, which is going to help. They get leader of the pack, which is going to help. They're going to get the new crowd pummeler, which is definitely going to help. Like, I can't imagine that not being BIS for Druids. So all that being said, though, I still think Druids is the one tank that I would say probably needs a buff. You could argue that it could go into the play with friends category, but I don't think they're gonna be pug champs, and I don't think they're like. And by comparison, you could say they're all around decent, but not by comparison to the other tanks. So I'm gonna put them in the needs a buff category for now. Let's put this back so I can use this for reference again later. All right, next let's do a healer. Which healer? You know what? Let's do the mage. Let's do the mage, because mage started out kind of crazy, right? So the Arcane Healer started out pretty crazy because Arcane Explosion was just taking care of all of the healer needs, which, you know, I can't say obviously it wasn't intended, because you would think like Blizzard would have caught that before they released it, but to me it looked like it was working as intended until mages were just making every other healer obsolete. But I think going into phase 2, when you look at a combination of the talents that they're getting, namely Arcane Power, I think is probably the one. When you look at the talents that they're getting, when you can speculate on the runes that they're gonna get, I think it's pretty safe to say that mages can go right into the all around decent category. Mages, I wouldn't really call them pug champs, because I can't tell you how many pugs I've definitely failed with like double mage healer, and maybe double mage healer just isn't good, but just having a mage healer a part of it. But then I've been a part of some great pugs and great guild runs with like my own personal mage healer friends and then other mage healers. So I think they're just all around decent. Let me pull up the mage joint. I could have sworn I made all of these talent trees pre-hand so I wouldn't have to make it on the fly, but apparently I was lacking, so that's my bad. I'm gonna get right. God's not done with me yet. Let me make one real quick. Let me see. Yeah, let's just duplicate this one. All right. I'm just gonna, like I said, random talent points. Don't pay too much attention to any of this stuff. So, just trying to hit 40. I went too far. Whatever. Obviously, just for reference, because I know somebody might point it out, you obviously would take Arcane Power. I'm just doing it so you see what 40 is and you see the spells that they get. But yeah, I think a combination of mage talent power is really going to speak in volumes, especially getting Arcane Power and being able to fully talent into Arcane Meditation. Like, I think these, I'm just going to put them in there just so you can see the tooltips. Pardon me. I think having Arcane Meditation is definitely going to work out. Being able to get the full power of this talent is really going to help mage mana issues. And obviously Arcane Power is going to help their throughput. Now, I could see a world where there's a rune that reverses the effects of Arcane Power. Instead of it costing more mana, it reduces the mana cost. They had something like that before. I just can't remember where it had it. But I could see a rune having that effect. But they also get a couple other things. They get Mage Armor, which also increases your mana regeneration. It's going to be really big for mage healers. Also increases your resistances to a lesser extent, but that's really big. Obviously, they get Portals, which doesn't really do anything for PvE necessarily, but it's still there. But I think the Mage Armor, the Arcane Power, and the Arcane Meditation opening up is definitely going to help mages stay kind of above the rim when it comes to most of the other healers. They're really good, and they probably have a higher skill cap because one, they are a newer healer. Yeah, you can say they're very akin to Disc on retail, but they don't play like Disc. They don't have the same spells. You're still kind of getting used to how what's that shit called? Let me double check before I get this wrong. Regeneration. There we go. How you're still getting used to how Temporal Beacon work. You're still kind of getting used to just how fast the heals are coming out, like what kind of damage you're healing, stuff like that. But other than that, like for the mages who kind of picked it up and ran with it, I think you're going to be fine. I think mage heals are definitely in a good spot to be pretty decent all around. What pushes them over the edge, in my opinion, is really just the runes. And I think you can say that for almost any class. Like, the runes can make or break you. Certain classes obviously lean on their runes more so than others. But yeah, what would break mage from decent to like top to the top 2 tiers for me is their runes. Like, their runes they can get some really, really lackluster runes, and I think they'll still just be decent, right? Or they can get some bomb ass runes and just become the best. Who knows? Only time will tell. But I think right now, just based on what we're seeing, I don't even have to see like Nomergon stuff for me to think that mage is gonna be pretty good. You go back over here. All right, back to tanks. You know what? Let's just get it out the way. Warlock top dog, no Kendrick. I'm not trolling either. Honestly, I think Warlocks are primed to really be like the best tank for phase 2. Let's go through it. Take this walk with me. So here I have the Warlock talent tree. We're going to talk about it. Obviously, like I said, this ain't a real build. This is just something I threw together. But the elephant in the room for Warlock tanks is obviously Soul Link. Getting Soul Link is undoubtedly going to make Warlocks the tankiest tank when it comes to both leveling up, or not leveling, leveling up, progging in Nomergon, and maybe not speed clearing, because that's a whole different build we'll talk about. But basically, for the most of the progression of Nomergon, Soul Link Warlock is the tankiest one. If you don't know what Soul Link is, when you have a demon active, you and that demon split 30% of all damage taken. So basically, that means you have a 30% DR active at all times as long as your demon is active. Obviously, you can see the implications with that and the Voidwalker, which is the tankiest pet. Now, in this talent build, I made sure I put points in the improved Voidwalker, because if you're running Soul Link, you're probably going to run Voidwalker, and you're going to want him to be as beefy as you can. Remember, in vanilla, there is no like avoidance talent where pets take reduced AoE damage. Pets will die, right, if you don't keep them in line. Voidwalker has the highest health pool, and I think the highest armor pool. So they're less likely to die, and you just want to make sure that they're always alive, so you have the Soul Link active, so you don't have to stop and recast, your demon in the middle of combat, so on and so forth. So I put points in the improved Voidwalker talent just to improve the effectiveness of the Voidwalker's abilities. Namely, this is really for Sacrifice. So Sacrifice is a Voidwalker ability that actually gets rid of the Voidwalker, but it puts a very large absorb shield on you. This is like an emergency thing. You can even say it's a cooldown, because it kind of is. It just makes you not take any damage for as long as the shield is up. It's an absorb. So you can say this is a cooldown, and then you can use Feldom to get the Voidwalker back real fast. So that's a nice little combo that you can do. Another major talent that's going to play into Warlock defenses is the Master Demonologist talent. So with this, while the Voidwalker is out, it reduces your physical damage taken by 10% flat. That's crazy. Honestly, that's going to get nerfed in my opinion. Something in this Warlock toolkit I think is going to get nerfed. Because it's a little ridiculous that you have Metamorphosis, which is increasing your armor by 500%, so basically 6 times the armor, and we're getting new cloth items, which is going to have more armor on it. So Warlock's already tanky. Like in my Warlock, fully buffed, I have about 4k armor, right? Fully buffed with consumes and my demon armor up. I have about 4k armor and like 2.1k health. I'm already at 60%. A little more. I don't know the exact number, but I know I'm a little bit more than like 60% of reduced damage for enemies at my level, right? Obviously, there's diminishing returns, so I don't know how that's going to translate to level 40, but I can imagine that it's going to be somewhere close to that number if I have the same, like once I get my gear and stuff like that. And then you tack on Soul Link, which is a flat 30% DR, and then Master Demonologist, which is 10% on physical damage. And if I'm not mistaken, I know for avoidance talents, things like lightning reflexes and the rogue talent tree, or like the parry talents for the melees, talents are not subject to diminishing return, so you get the full effect. So if I use that ruling for this talent, that means that this 10% physical damage reduction should be additive. So whatever your armor is and whatever your physical damage reduction is, in my case, using my example, it was 60%. That's just a flat 10% added on top, which is 70%, which tells me that that's incredibly broken and something is going to get nerfed. That's how I feel. But if it doesn't get nerfed, yeah, Warlock is the most tankiest tank, bar none, hands down, and it ain't even close. And I think this is going to go well for a lot of Nomergon fights. If you've never done like the dungeon Nomergon, I suggest you like go on retail or go on like hardcore. Anywhere you can actually do the original dungeon version and just like stroll through it and really understand like that most of these bosses are kind of melee heavy. Like especially I think I have a sneaking suspicion that the manual crowd pummeler boss, who actually drops the mace, the manual crowd pummeler, I feel like he's going to be the patchwork of that raid because he doesn't have any mechanics. He does melee. Like, so he actually has one mechanic. I'm tripping. But I feel like he's going to be the patchwork of that raid. I think he is like pseudo iconic. He's not really iconic. He's more so iconic for the item that he drops. But I think Blizzard's going to make us work for it. And any patchwork style fight that just does heavy amounts of physical damage is right up the Warlock's alley, especially with this build setup. So defensively, I think Warlock's got it in the bag, hands down. Offensively, I think they're in a pretty good spot too. And that's because you don't really have to do the demonology build. I'm going to do it, especially on the gear up process while I'm, progging through Nomergon. But once I get comfortable with the damage that I'm taking and my health pool and my own stat values, the destruction tree is actually looking really promising because they have a lot of favorable DPS and threat increases. I think the more prominent ones most certainly is the combination of devastation and ruin. But let's talk about ruin real quick. Ruin, honestly, is probably for its investment, probably the strongest DPS talent in vanilla. So Ruin, I see you have the tooltip up here. It increases your critical strike damage bonus by 100%, right? Now, there are other talents that increase your critical damage bonus. However, there's not many talents. In fact, I think Ruin is the only one that increases your critical damage bonus with one talent point investment. Like if you think about, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, what's a like lethality in the rogue tree. Lethality increases rogue's crit damage for 5 talent points, right? So, and it's not even 100%. Let's just, I know I have the rogue one up. Let's just pull that over real quick so y'all can see. Here it is. Lethality, boom. I'm like a pictures guy. I don't really know where the talents are. I just kind of remember them from their icons. But lethality increases the critical damage bonus of all those abilities by 6%, stacking 5 times. So that's a 30% increase for a 5 talent point investment. So Ruin is more than triple that bonus for 80% of the investment reduction. Like, yeah, Ruin is like the best talent for its investment cost. So a 1 talent point that gives you 100% crit damage bonus is nutty. So Ruin is definitely going to help once the Warlock Tank boys get geared and they're comfortable with the damage that they're taking and they just want to do, big pumps and they want to, parse on Warcraft logs. Ruin is definitely going to help with that. We also get kind of a little band-aid over our, I won't even say little, it's a big band-aid in my opinion. A band-aid over our AoE threat, and that's because of intensity. So intensity is a talent that gives us spell pushback protection when we're channeling Rain of Fire or Hellfire, which is the new ability. So, and I think you can see here, it's a 2 talent point investment, 35%, so that's 70% protection. And Hellfire, I think we get at 30. Yes, we do. Boom. So Hellfire, you've probably seen, if you've played Classic at any point, you've probably seen a Warlock channel Hellfire at some point, especially if you played, like TBC. Like I know a lot of Warlocks used to channel Hellfire, but basically it's a channel spell that pulses fire around you. It's not like Rain of Fire where you can target it. It pulses around you. And intensity gives this channeled ability 70% pushback protection. So you only have a 30% chance to get interrupted with by your channel, which is pretty good. It's not a 100% chance, unfortunately, but I'll take this. I'll take what I can get. Take the 70. So what I'm saying is you can combine the Lake of Fire rune, which when you drop Rain of Fire, it leaves fire on the ground, increases your fire damage from you and your pet by 40%. You drop that on the ground, and chances are that one tick isn't going to get interrupted because thanks to intensity, it works with Rain of Fire too. It's not going to get interrupted. You drop Lake of Fire, then you start channeling Hellfire, and everything is attacking you. There's no one who's going to take AoE threat from you. You are the master of the mobs. Easy clap. So I think Hellfire is definitely a nice little band-aid over our AoE threat, which is really where the Warlock is the weakest at. And it's crazy because honestly, it's not even that big a deal. The Warlock single target threat is so strong that the AoE threat don't even matter. You can tab Searing Pain and you'll be all right. But Hellfire is definitely something that we're getting. We're getting another rank of Demon Armor, which is pretty big. I'm trying to think what else is pretty substantial. The Spellstones are pretty cool too. Any little increase for tanks is going to go far. We're also getting access to the Fell Hunter, which I don't see. I know we get it. There it is. Boom. So it's also at 30. Which I'm pretty sure takes over for the Succubus in terms of pet damage. I think the Fell Hunter becomes the highest pet that deals the most damage, even with investment to things like improved Imp. I think if you're going full Destro though, the Imp might be the one that's that does a little bit better because you have like improved Firebolt for the Imp here. But if you're combining it with Lake of Fire, obviously Imp does fire damage, so it's going to be a little bit better if you're running that kind of build. But if you're running like the Soul Link build, I think the Fell Hunter is the most damage. So here we have a tank that is not even arguably, just hands down the best defensive tank with Soul Link, Master Demonologist, the ability to use Sacrifice, all of that stuff. And then you have, once you know you don't need that defensive power anymore, you can just switch gears and go straight for offense, and you can get things like Devastation, you can get Ruin, you can get Ember Storm, which increases your fire damage, you can get Improved Searing Pain, which just gives more crit to Searing Pain. Like Warlock is going to be the best tank in Phase 2, and I don't think it's close. Unless there's unless the other tanks just get a crazy just rune combinations, I don't think none of them is beating the Warlock defensively, and I think Warlock's gonna be the best offensively too. I don't think I'm crazy for saying that. So hold on, let me shrink that. So yeah, Warlock definitely goes in the top dog category, and that's where I'm gonna leave it at. Let's go into the healers. Let's talk about Priest. Let's talk about both Disc and Holy, because I think 40 is enough of there's enough talent points and there's enough spells to where now you can differentiate both specs. I think I made the comment in my Phase 1 stream where I said 25 really isn't high enough really for any spec to have that much identity. Like even Warlocks, right? Like I'm not a Demonology Warlock at 25, even though I have meta. Like for a long time, most of my talents were in the Affliction tree. So I don't think spell or spec identity is a thing at 25. At 40 is a little bit different because you can reach capstone talents and stuff like that. You can kind of dual spec, if not dual spec, but sub spec, I should say. So I think 40, you can definitely see the differences between Disc and Holy. And if I'm placing them, I think even with the nerfs, unless they get another nerf, this I still think is platinum no features. You can even put it in top dog, but we're gonna talk about it a little bit. When it comes to Holy, Holy, and this is really for any healer, but Holy really depends, or any throughput healer really depends on the type of damage that's coming out. Because if you don't really have consistent raid damage that's coming out, it kind of diminishes the throughput healer, right? That's why you see things like Resto Druids that, even though Resto Druids are really excelling in any category, but like on fights like Kelris where there's a lot of damage going out, a lot of just haphazard damage. On fights like Gelahas where there's just a lot of haphazard damage going out. So things like that, the throughput healers kind of edge them on. But for any damage that's predictable, that's not haphazard, yeah, the Disc Priest is gonna rock it. They're gonna put shield on everybody and call it a day. And I think Disc Priest was so dominant. That's why Blizzard nerfed the penance and they nerfed something else. They nerfed penance and I think they nerfed Power Word Shield. I don't have that specific hotfix sheet up, but I'm pretty sure they nerfed Power Word Shield. But I think that nerf came too late. By the time they nerfed Priest, the Phase 1 we were like a month out from Phase 2. Everyone had got the gear ready. So, and they nerfed Kelris, which was arguably the hardest boss in that raid. So by the time they nerfed Priest, it was already too late. Now I get it. They probably nerfed Priest for like future stuff, because if they left it as is, priest would just be dominant for every leveling phase. Like it's kind of hard, it's kind of impossible to get around a healer who can just put absorbs on everybody and have them not take damage. It's almost night and day having a priest to not having a priest. And I think Blizzard kind of saw that, so that's why they put that nerf out so late. It might not have been necessarily for BFD purposes, because like I said, I think it was too late, but it might just be. Hold up. Okay, I think we back. Hold up. Woo, that was spooky. That was spooky for a second. We back. I don't know what happened with OBS. That was crazy. But we here. Anyway, I was talking about Priest, and I was saying that I think the nerf to Priest came a little too late. Just a tad bit too late. And it didn't really matter in the long run. Like, I'm going to keep referencing my Warlock. My Warlock is fully geared, and regardless to whether... Yeah, I was going for a second, but I'm here now. Regardless to whether Priest got the power word shield nerf or not, I wasn't taking that much damage anyway. So, like I said, I think that nerf came a little too late. If they would have nerfed Priest the same time that they nerfed the mages, we might have seen a difference, but they didn't. They waited way too long for that. So, I think that's what happened. Hold on one second. Let me see what's going on. Make sure I don't disconnect again. Hold up. Let me just fix something real quick. Something's going on with my stream, and I don't want to lose y'all again. So let me just fix something real quick, and we're gonna keep rocking. Let me see. Make sure we good. Okay. I think that fixed the issue. Hold on, let me see. I think we're good. Okay. Woo. See, when you start talking about Priest, things go wrong, right? That's a sign. That's divine intervention if I ain't seen it. But anyway. So when it comes to disc, let's talk about disc, right? So I think the most notable power increase to disc when it comes to like talents and stuff like that is most obviously the power infusion talent. That's their capstone talent. We all know what power infusion is. It's the buff that they're going to put on casters. It's going to increase their spell damage and their healing by 20%. They might even use it on themselves, right? I think power infusion is definitely like one of the biggest power increases for priests. The next biggest one is probably not mental agility. Where is it? Meditation. I think priests can actually maybe not max this out, but they can definitely get this talent point because it only takes 10 talent points. We got 16. So I'm pretty sure priests can already get this, but meditation plus divine spirit is definitely... Oh yeah, we definitely good in the stream. My bad. Got sidetracked. We good here. Meditation plus spirit, divine spirit plus power infusion is definitely going to be something that is going to be good. Let's put in some talents real quick so we can see the spell ranks and stuff at 40. Hold on one second. Yeah, they can definitely max it out. Yeah, for a fact. Just maxed it. I'm at that stream stuff happened, right? I was on a roll. But anyway, I went a little too high. Let's here we can. Yeah, all right, we dialed it back to 40. Okay. So when you look at the list of ranks and stuff that priests are going to get at 40, So they obviously are going to get new ranks of power word shield, which is probably the biggest defining factor, right? Having more ranks on your most effective heal, or in this case absorb, is always really good. They're going to get more ranks of inner fire, which is going to increase their survivability, which is cool. Like I said, they get access to divine spirit, which is going to be really good for another raid buff. Even though it takes like their entire mana pool now to buff, so I can only imagine having another buff that you got to put on people. That's gonna, make you want to drink even more. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, power infusion, another rank of power word shield, divine spirit. These are all really good things in the Disc Priest tree. Obviously, they already have access to things like Strength of Soul and Serendipity. They already have access to Penance and Circle of Healing. They already have access to Power Word Barrier and Prayer of Mending. So there's no real power creep to be had there, which brings me to my point on, I'm going to segue real quick into Holy. So, like, Serendipity, which is in here. Serendipity, let me just set it here. Serendipity, Circle of Healing, and we'll use Prayer Bending. Serendipity and Circle of Healing were really Holy staples. So the fact that they're runes kind of has me questioning, number one, what are they going to add in Phase 2? Number two, how does these two abilities being runes, how does that play an effect on Holy as a whole? Because is there really a real need to go fully into Holy if you're just shielding people? Now, Holy does have some throughput talents. I'm not saying that they don't, right? Obviously, you have spiritual healing, which is going to increase the amount healed by your healing spells. So that's really good. That's not a bad talent to have. They have Spirit of Redemption. So when you die, you come back to Spirit of Redemption. That's really good. That's not bad. They have Inspiration, which you know how I feel about Inspiration and Ancestral Fortitude. I love those two talents, especially as a tank. That's really good. But it just begs to the question of, are these things better than what you can get in the Disc tree? And does it drastically change your playstyle from just shielding? So this is what it's hard to rank a healer based off of this, because really you rank healers based off of the type of content that they're doing. And we don't really know anything about Nomargon right now. I can kind of judge them on BFD, but again, Holy Priests don't really exist in BFD, in Black Fathom Depths, because no real spec, quote unquote, exists. Disc Priest doesn't technically exist in BFD because, again, they're too stable, or they're in one stable, I should say. Penance is a rune. It's not really tied to the discipline tree. So, and Power Word Shield is universal. Obviously, we know that. So, I think Holy, outside of, I would say, doing, like, foregoing getting Power Infusion and maybe speccing all of the important buffs, like improved Fortitude, getting Divine Spirit, maxing out Mental Agility, or Meditation, I'm sorry, not Mental Agility, maxing out Meditation, and then maybe pivoting to get to Inspiration. That might be a thing. Because let's see, is that even possible? Let's find out real quick. Doing this for science, doing this live real quick. Actually, I don't even think you get martyrdom, to be quite honest. Let's do that. I'm going to do it anyway. How do I get down here? Boom. So you technically could, right? You have, if you're level 31, you have 9 talent points. Actually, you'd be 1 talent point off. So you couldn't have Divine Spirit and Inspiration. So you would have to pick. Do you want more Spirit for your party? Do you want the extra armor on the tank? You're probably, in a 10-man, you're probably going to pick the extra armor on the tank. I'm going to be real. You're probably not going to take Divine Spirit. You're probably going to pick the extra armor on the tank. And I'm not even saying that this is a real talent setup. I just kind of threw some talents in there just to see. But let me see. Proven News is a really bad talent. Yeah, let's just make this easier on myself. You can't even get that. So you would have to put 20 into the discipline tree and then 11 into the holy tree. And I guess you could trade inner focus for inspiration, for 1 rank at least of inspiration. That's not so bad. It's not a bad trade-off there. But going back to my ranking, let's move this over. I think I'm cool with Disc being in Platinum No Features. I don't really think that they're going to lose any power unless they get nerfed again. If they get nerfed again, like if their Penance gets nerfed again, if, you know, I don't know what they would do. Because if nerfing any baseline thing also nerfs Holy. So they would have to nerf things that are like specific, like runes and stuff like that. So I think when it comes to that, I'm cool with Discipline, quote unquote Discipline, being in the Platinum with no features. But see, the reverse is also the same. You could also put most of your talents into the Holy Tree, get the throughput stuff, and then just run Penance and you can run Penance, you can run Prayer of Mending, and you can run Strength of Soul. Like, you can do all of this stuff and still kind of play the Disc Priest role, the absorb healer role, and still have the throughput talents from the Holy Tree. So maybe I should have combined Holy and Disc. Because I don't see a world where a healer is not using Penance, right? It's just too strong to kind of give up. I don't see a world where a healer is not using Prayer of Mending, right? It's just too strong to give up. There's probably going to be some fights where you might want to pick Power Barrier, but I feel like just naturally you're going to use Prayer of Mending, you're going to use Penance. And Strength of Soul and Serendipity are probably swappable. Those two are swappable. But maybe 40 is still too close to really have an identity for Disc in here. So I think by default, I'm going to put this one at the end here. And I'm going to leave Disc there. Because I think primarily the spells that you're using are kind of Disc-centric. Penance is a Disc move. Like, Prayer of Mending is an everyone move. But Penance is, not everyone, but all priest move. But Penance is a Disc move. So we're going to leave it like that. Next, let's talk Paladin. Paladin. So, Paladin, honestly, I think is judging it off of BFD in Phase 1, I thought it was pretty mid-pack. It wasn't horrible. It had some weaknesses, but it was far above and beyond what Paladin tanking used to be in Vanilla Classic and Season of Mastery. We'll say that. So, with that being said, Paladin definitely, glowed up in the world. Now, judging off of Phase 1, I think Paladins were really strong on the level up, obviously because they still, for the Alliance side, are the best AoE the best AoE tank, right? Effortlessly. Like, yeah, you could do it with Warlocks. Yes, Warriors got the Furious Thunder rune, but Paladin was still the better AoE tank. Even if you weren't running Consecration, which a lot of Paladins started doing, and then they kind of got off of it when they realized, I don't really need Consecration like that, and it's a lot of mana. They started really using Divine Storm as the main AoE generator, which is fine. Like, Divine Storm works. Paladins still were the best, even without Consecration, and they kind of showed and proved it. One thing that I will say about BFD and Paladins is that for speed running, for like just making sure trash is always on the tank, you probably want a Paladin, right? Now, BFD isn't a place that has a lot of trash, or even any particularly difficult trash packs, to be quite honest. You could probably say arguably the hardest trash pulls is probably leading up to Kelris, and even those mobs aren't difficult at all in the slightest. So, that being said, when you can just gather up mobs haphazardly and have them stick on you, the Paladin is great for that. Now, looking at Gnomeregan, if you've never done Gnomeregan, like I suggested before, just go take a tune into Gnomeregan. Gnomeregan has so much trash, and I think that only plays to the strength of the Paladin. So for early on, for when you're progressing through Gnomeregan and you're gearing up, you're probably gonna have an easier run if you have a Paladin tank with you, just to help handle trash pulls from boss to boss. So I think Paladin gets a point there. Where Paladins kind of falter at, not even kind of, it's hard to say kind of, because when you're comparing it to other tanks like Warlocks, like Rogues, Paladins don't have the best single target threat. Now, it's made up for it with their AoE threat and their, ability to really just kind of shrug off damage too, because, again, they're wearing mail at a time where, like, Rogues are still wearing leather, and a lot of it isn't bonus armor leather. A lot of it is just avoidance and stamina leather, right? So, Paladins are wearing mail. They can use shields. But the thing with Paladin, let me bring up the thing here. Hold up. The thing with Paladin is that I feel like a lot of their early talents are just kind of weak. especially like for tanking, like a lot of their early talents are weak. Yes, Consecration is strong, but like Redoubt is okay, but it doesn't stack with Aegis. So it's like that's where we're using Divine Storm at. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit kind of like, all right, yeah, I'm good at this one thing, but everywhere else I'm not the greatest at. So looking at their capstone stuff, Holy Shield I think is going to be a nice little boost to both their single target and their AoE threat. And I feel like they're probably going to get a rune that either directly or indirectly goes well with Holy Shield. I don't know what it would be necessarily, but I feel like they're going to get a rune that helps out both directly and indirectly. So Holy Shield, I think, is going to be a boost for them. They're also going to get... Sorry, I thought I heard something. They're also going to get one-hand weapon specialization, which is going to help with, again, their single target threat. They're going to get Blessing of Sanctuary, which is going to help... Again, another Thorns effects with their threat. And like they don't really need help with AoE, even though like this is normally attached to an AoE style ability, because it is. Like when you block, and Paladins are known for blocking, they take holy damage, they do a threat. But this is also really good for a single target threat. And knowing most of the bosses in No More Gone from like the dungeon versions, I think the Crowd Pummeler, like I said, is going to be the patchwork, which means he's going to either hit hard or hit fast, or a combination of both. I think Thermoplug is definitely going to be hitting pretty hard and pretty susceptible to blocked attacks. What's the elemental called? The Viscous something. I forget his name. He's probably not going to matter. Like that's probably Warlock Tanking. He's probably going to cast something. You ain't got to worry about that, right? Here, let me just make sure we can do this real quick, because I hate referencing things and getting the names wrong. So let me just see something real quick. It just came up too. That's crazy. No More Gone Zone. Here we go. So let's just say Blizzard uses the same boss setup, which I think they did for BFD. Crowd Pummeler, we already talked about. The Electrocutioner 6000 is another one I think is going to be pretty susceptible to blocks. Viscous Fallout, that's what it's called. That one's probably not going to be able to do anything as a block tank. Grubbus is that troll guy that was part of that little gauntlet. That's probably another one that's going to get be like a heavy melee or heavy ad fight, because he did some in ad. So I think Grubbus is probably one where a Paladin's going to shine the most at. One where he's going to shine the least at is the Viscous Fallout. And like I said, Normergon is probably going to have a lot of trash in it. I should have kept that tab open. That's my bad. Normergon's probably going to have a lot of trash in it. So Paladin's just going to become really, really powerful on the gear up. Let me put my full talents in here so we can check out the 40 spells that they're getting. Make sure I hit. But yeah, I don't think the Paladin's power is really lies within its talent points. I think a lot of their power is probably going to come from runes, gear, and abilities. Obviously, we know Paladins are but they give a lot of really good buffs, even though Hunters have kind of taken over the Kings thing. So that means you really don't really, if anything, that means you save talent points not having to invest in Kings, if you can find yourself running with just a consistent Hunter. But Holy Shield, like I said, is going to be pretty good. Blessing Sanctuary is going to be pretty good. Let me see. New ranks of Shield of the Righteous is going to be really good. Do they get another rank of Judgment? Oh, they have to. Let me see. Maybe not. But they have Crusader Strike anyway, so that doesn't even matter. And if anything, when it comes to Paladin, there's two places I want to tier them at. Number one would be for sure like Pug Champs, because I think Paladins just do really well in Pugs. They give a lot of good buffs. They're really good at AoE tanking, so it makes trash pulls really, really easy. And that's probably, outside of like certain boss mechanics, that's probably where you're going to see a lot of deaths in Pug groups, where like someone's accidentally pulling, or ads aren't dying as fast or whatever have you. At least early on, like Pug Champs is definitely a spot where I could see Paladins being. I could also see Paladins going, like I could also kind of make a stance on putting them in the needs a buff category, because I'm going to leave them in Pug Champs though, but I can make an argument for putting them in the needs a buff category, because Paladins and Shamans, which I'll talk about soon too, I think they're two sides of the same coin, whereas they're real, if they can't block anything, you see a power decrease in them, right? because shamans is just a mirror of paladins. They obviously don't have all the same spells and whatnot. Obviously, shamans have totems to buff. Paladins have just natural buffs. Paladins have auras and stuff like that. Shamans don't have auras. Neither of them have like defensive cooldowns. I guess you could say shamanistic rage, but that's definitely taken over an important rune slot. So you can't really count that one. So neither of them really have like tank cooldowns, quote unquote. So to me, they're like two sides of the same coin. They're both mana tanks, which is a gift and a curse in my opinion. They're both block tanks, which is a gift and a curse in my opinion. They're both really good at AoE tanking. They both kind of falter at single target threat. I feel like paladins are more so than shamans. I think shamans are a little bit better at single target threat, but they both kind of falter at single target threat. So they both can be really good in pugs. And I think in this case, when it comes to paladin, it's not going to matter your talent. Your talents aren't really going to matter. Like I said, I don't think they have too much impactful talents, to be quite honest. Holy Shield to me is like the most impactful talent that they're getting. And let me just go back real quick. Hold up. Last point I'll make about talents. You could argue that, let me see if we could do this real quick. Let me see. And we could take away Sanctuary, right? You could argue that a build like this can come to fruition. So it's kind of like what we did with the Priest, where you do 20 points in one tree, or 21 points in this case in one tree, and then enough points in this other tree to really just get consecration. And that's 41. That's too much. So I overcounted somewhere. So I would have to take a point out of something, probably anticipation. Right? Boom. Call it a day. You could argue something like this will come to fruition. So here, we're not doing divine attack, probably divine strength. But yeah, just to get improved seals and consecration, and you still get important defensive talents from the protection tree. This is something that could help, right? Now, this is only better, in my opinion, if there are no ad fights that you can block, because the minute that you have ad fights where they're doing melee damage, it immediately becomes better just to get Sanctuary and Holy Shield. But fights that you really can't rely on blocking, which there aren't really a lot of ad fights. I think there's only one ad fight in BFD, which was what's his name? Jesus Christ, why can't I remember his name? Do you count Lorgan Shed as an ad fight, I guess? I guess you can count it. There's not really that many ad fights where I guess, Akamai, he's an ad fight. Akamai is an ad fight. When someone cleanses, there spawns a lot of ads. A Paladin is perfect for tanking that fight. So fights like that, Paladins really shine. Any other fight, some of the other tanks are going to shine a little bit more. Even with this talent build diversity. And even still, I still think Paladins are probably not going to go the consecration route. They're just going to keep using Divine Storm, and they're going to say, you know what, it's not even worth putting my 10 points in Holy. I'm going to just go straight down the protection tree, get my Holy Shield, get improved one-hand specialization, get Reckoning, and call it a day. But I think just by the nature of Nomergon, and we'll see what happens with their runes, but by the virtue of Nomergon, just I think it's going to be a trash heavy fight. Paladins are going to be pug champs for pug fast runs and for prog runs when you're learning all of the trash pulls. We're going to leave them in pug champs. Since we talked about it already, we can talk about shamans. I'm going to put them with pug champs too, but I'm going to analyze them a little bit differently, because I think shamans are going to be a little bit more impacted by their talents, more so than paladins will. So when we go to the shaman tree and we max out like what you would maybe consider some important talents here, I'm just going to put actually we don't even need that one. Just put that in there, do that, do. Just putting points in, guys. Don't mind it. Don't take it to heart too much. Just putting in talent points. But yeah, shamans, to me, have way more impactful talents than paladins do. So I do want to talk about them. Number one, parry. You know what's crazy? Why is the ability to parry a talent for shamans? I never understood that. Maybe somebody in the comments or in the chat at some point is going to explain to me why shamans have a talent that's parry instead of just learning it from the trainer. I have no idea why that's a thing. But anyway, parry is definitely one of them. Just getting the ability to parry does wonders for your avoidance, which does wonders for your threat damage reduction. Sorry, not your threat, your damage reduction. Number 2, and I'm going to say this with an asterisk, Storm Strike. So Storm Strike is a good single target nuke. However, if it operates the same way that old Storm Strike did, where it's like you put up the Storm Strike debuff and like boomkins are taking up the increased, like, so if you can see, Storm Strike causes the next 2 nature damage dealing spells to be increased by 20%, but that can get absorbed by any nature damage. So if a boomkin, or maybe not a boomkin in this case, but a druid in this case, yeah, boomkins, because they get boomkin form at 40. Yeah, a boomkin is doing wrath, that'll eat up Storm Strike. If I'm not mistaken, I think Serpent Sting was eating up Storm Strike too. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that one. Don't quote me on that one. I know Wrath for sure was doing that, so keep that in mind. Certain weapon procs that had nature was eating it up. Like, it was crazy. So if Storm Strike operates the old way, then that's really unfortunate on Blizzard's part, and they need to fix that. And it doesn't help Shaman's case. But if it doesn't, if it only works with the Shaman's attack, which I'm hoping that Blizzard changes, which, as we've shown, that they're not afraid to hotfix things, then I think Storm Strike becomes a really good talent for the Shaman Tank boys. And then let's move down to their talents. So wait. Did I go over? Yeah, I did go over. So I'm going to reduce some talents real quick, get it back to 40. And I think the one thing that Shamans are really, really excited for is Wind Fury Totem. However, obviously we know Druids have this, and if I'm not mistaken, Druids have a better version of Wind Fury than Shamans, which is kind of crazy. Let me show you. Let me do a side by side so I can show you real quick. Where is the Wild Strikes rune? I saw this in, I forgot which Discord I saw this in, and it kind of blew my mind a little bit. Let me click on it. Shrink. Let's pull this to the side. Shrink this down. Oh, I closed it. I'm crazy. Hold on. You know what? I'm making this a lot harder than what it is. Let's just do this. Hold up. Wild Strikes. Here we go. Boom. So here's Wild Strikes. Right? Boom. Wow. Perfect. All right. Here's Wild Strikes. So Wild Strikes, if you can see it, while you're in cat form or your animal forms, each melee hit has a 20% chance of granting the attacker an extra attack with 20% additional attack power, right? Then you look at Wind Fury Totem. Hold up. Let me get my cursor right. Wind Fury Totem. Each hit has a 20% chance of granting the attacker one extra attack with 122 extra melee attack power. So the problem here is that Wild Strikes scales with the person's attack power, whereas Wind Fury just gives you a flat. So if you are really geared, there's a chance that your attack power, the attack power that you're getting from Wild Strikes, the 20%, is higher than the 122 or whatever number it is at max rank that you'll be getting from Wind Fury Totem, which is kind of unfortunate. That's kind of unfortunate because like Wind Fury is like a Shaman staple. There's no way on God's green earth that Wild Strike should be stronger than Wind Fury Totem, in my opinion, or have the potential to be stronger. We won't say it's stronger outright because it might not be stronger outright, but there's no way it should have the potential to be stronger than Wind Fury Totem. That's kind of blasphemous if you ask me. So the fact that Wild Strikes is scaling and has the potential to be better than Wind Fury is kind of crazy. It kind of takes a lot of the wind out of the Shaman sails. So that's something I just wanted to bring up, which is, it's kind of unfortunate, but I mean, it is what it is. But back to Shaman tanking. Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of their power comes from their talents. Like I said before, they're going to get parry, which is going to allow them to parry stuff and avoid damage. They're going to get Storm Strike, which I'm hoping they fix so that other players' nature effects don't don't override this. Like don't absorb it, because that would be kind of crazy. OD said Serpent Sting. Yeah, Serpent Sting eating it up is crazy. Like that would be annoying. I couldn't play Shaman. They're gonna get weapon mastery. Don't they get spirit weapons, or is that a wrath thing? That might be a different thing. Obviously they get a whole bunch of threat talents. They get access to maxing out flurry, which is gonna be really good. They get access to maxing out toughness, which is gonna be really good. Obviously they're gonna get some runes. They get Wind Fury Totem, which again is unfortunate that Wild Strikes might be stronger. They get higher ranks of their currently existing totems, which is really good. They get Chain Heal, which may not have direct tanking implications. Like when you're actively tanking, you're not going to stop and cast Chain Heal. But if you're off tanking, it could definitely help out. So Chain Heal is definitely a thing that is... I know Resto Shamans can't wait for that, because Healing Rain turned out to be not so great. But Chain Heal definitely could be something that you could use. They get Nature Resist Totem. There's a lot of... Crazy enough for a machine-themed raid or dungeon, there was a lot of nature damage in Omegon, right? Like those little trogs used to throw those little orbs at you that did nature damage. Some of them radiated nature damage. The viscous fallout is all nature damage. So Nature Resist Totem might become a thing too. Keep a lookout for that. But when it comes to Shaman, like I said, I think they're going to be more impacted by their talents, more so in my opinion than Paladins would. And we have yet to see what runes that they're going to get. And let me just double check, because I want to make sure I'm saying this correctly. Yeah, they can't get Shamanistic Rage without foregoing Way of the Earth, so you can't even tank with that. So yeah, they don't even get a cooldown. But and at any rate, they still get 2 important talents and then some really good supplementary talents. So that's really good. So I think Shamans are going to rest next to their Paladin brothers in the Pug Champs category. We can move this now. All right, so that was 2 tanks. Let's talk about some healers. Resto Shaman, since we just came off of Shaman. Resto Shaman. So Resto Shaman in phase 1 really probably was the epitome of I'll be stronger later. I get good later, guys. I'll come back later. And that showed. We just talked about Shamans missing Chain Heal, and Chain Heal is the bread and butter for a Resto Shaman. Let's reset this real quick. They also get access when they're able to max out everything to Mana Tide Totem. So Mana Tide Totem, which mana is a thing right now because we have such low mana pools at level 25. It improves a little bit at 40. Obviously, at 40 we're gonna have higher mana pools, but I think Mana Tide Totem is definitely going to be something that is going to be relied on by Resto Shamans. Obviously, they get Chain Heal, which is the... Oh, hold up. Let me put some talents in here real quick so we can actually see the spells. No, not that one. I went way too far. I'm already at level 50. I went way too far, but it's fine. It's fine. We good. We can just stop at 40, which is some right here. They get Chain Heal at 40, if I'm not mistaken. Where is Chain Heal? See, this is why, you know what? This is why I shouldn't have did this. I'm already backtracking my words. Boom. All right, there we go. Now, where is Chain Heal? There it is. Rank 1. They get their first rank of Chain Heal at 40. Unfortunately, they don't get rank 2. But Chain Heal in and of itself is a really good heal. It's really efficient. And especially in a 10-man, especially since Nomergon's 10-man, that just boosts the power of Chain Heal, because now you really know that you're not going to miss any jumps when it comes to Chain Heal. And you're healing, what, it heals 3 people, 3 targets total. I would imagine that there's going to be a rune that not only increases the heal on Chain Heal, but increases the jump. I think there's definitely going to be a rune that does that, so keep that in mind. I think that's kind of a no-brainer when it comes to Resto Shaman runes. But Chain Heal is definitely going to be the bread and butter. I think Chain Heal in conjunction with... Where is it? I thought it was in there. Healing Rain, which is somewhere here. Where's Healing Rain? Oh, boom. I think Chain Heal in conjunction with Healing Rain is definitely going to increase the Shaman's AoE healing ability, especially in a 10-man setting. So the 10-man Pug Champ for healing might be Resto Shaman once they get access to Chain Heal. And that's not even... I don't even think that's an exaggeration, to be quite honest with you. They also get pretty important talents outside of Mana Tide Totem. I think the next best one probably is Purification. Increasing the effectiveness of your healing spells is really, really strong. Like, this talent is notoriously strong in like a lot of iterations of WoW. In Vanilla, in TBC, in Wrath. Like, Purification just stacks with so many ancillary things that it's a really good talent to have. So Purification is another really important talent that they get. Nature Swiftness is another really good talent that they get. Just being able to fire off an instant max rank healing wave or instant chain heal. Really, really good. So I think, like, honestly, these 3 talents right here, Nature Swiftness, Purification, and Mana Tide, really, really good talents. Really good talents. And speaking of talents, Resto Shaman specifically is another one where they have a lot of power in their talents. As you can see with this just kind of random mock-up, I'm already at 40 talent points, and I haven't even gotten to, what is it, the 5th tier, of talents. I haven't even gotten to it yet. So, and that's where like a lot of the good stuff is. Like, you have Healing Way here, which is another really good talent. Yeah, like once you get to the bottom tier of Shaman talents, Resto Shaman becomes really online. So I think 40 is going to be a really good level cap, a really good phase for Resto Shaman. So I'm going to put them in the all-around decent, because I think Chain Heal, Healing Rain, Purification, Mana Tide Totem, Healing Way, all of those things are going to culminate into a pretty decent, maybe mana hungry, but still pretty decent healer. Let's go to Resto Druid now. And Resto Druid, to me, I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't really think Resto Druid would be as good as it is. But as you know, it was shown, Resto Druid can move. So when it comes to Resto Druid, I feel like it's kind of like the inverse of Resto Shaman, where it's like a lot of their power came from their runes, like Wild Growth. And hold on, let me put it up on the screen real quick. Boop. Not saying that they had bad talents, because I think for what they had okay-ish level 25 talents, but a lot of their power, I guess you could say that for most classes, that most of their power came from the runes. But I think it's much more evident with the Resto Druid. So with Resto Druid, obviously we have the 3 that I just highlighted: Living Seed, Wild Growth, and Life Bloom. Really, really put a lot of power into the Resto Druid. Let me just put this out so we can, what am I doing? So we can actually see what they get at 40. 2, 3. Oh, no, too far. There we go. So, with 40 comes a couple of new things. Obviously, higher ranks and spells are really, really good. When it comes to abilities, where is it? Hold on. Let me just type it out real quick so I can find it. Okay, there it is. All right. So they get Tranquility at 30. I was trying to find Tranquility. I saw rank 2 down here. I just didn't know when they learned the first rank of Tranquility. So they get the first rank of Tranquility at 30. They get the next rank at 40. And Tranquility is kind of a spell that doesn't really get used often, because 1, it costs a lot of mana. 2, it only heals the party. It's not like a true AoE. But in a 10-man, a party's half the raid group. So you might see some use out of Tranquility, right? Having a higher rank of Rejuvenation is going to be really, really good. Getting access to Innervate is going to be amazing. Like, Innervate is really gonna boost the power level of Resto Druid. And aside from that, Resto Druid is another class that I think just really has really good, like, 3rd, 4th, and 5th tier talents. Like, the last 3 talents are really, really good. Nature Swiftness is, obviously we talked about our Resto Shaman, is a really good talent. Gift of the Natures are really good throughput talent, increasing all your healing by 10%. Nature's Bounty is a pretty good talent. Or not, it's not Nature's Bounty. It's called Nature's Bounty later on, guys. I'm pretty sure it's called Nature's Bounty later on. But Improved Regrowth is what they're calling it in Vanilla, is a really good talent. Swiftman's a really good talent. So, like, these last 3 tiers, what is this one? This is Improved Tranquility. Don't think you're really going to use that one that much. But these four definitely are going to be pretty good. So I think Resto Druid is looking to be also really good. I would imagine is in terms of rune speculation, they already have Wild Growth and Life Bloom. I'm not really sure what they would get as another rune. Maybe Tree Form, but I feel like Tree Form feels like it would be too strong in a classic setting, especially in a 10-man classic setting. Having Tree Form, I feel like it's just way too strong. So I don't know if they would get Tree Form. Getting the ability to use Tranquility and move, that might be one I could see them using. That would probably be a cool rune to have. Another cool rune to have would be what is it? Don't they I forget the name. It escapes me now. But I think it's kind of hard for me to kind of gauge what runes they would get as Resto, because they got Wild Growth and Life Bloom, which is kind of the bread and butter. Like in to top it all off, they got Living Seed too. So they kind of got a lot of good things. They're getting Innovate. Battle Res might be one. I could see them getting. Well, they have Rebirth, but like Battle Res in the sense of maybe getting a regular res and a battle res. I could see them getting that like as a rune, maybe. I don't know. But Druids are already strong with the 3 runes that they got. So it's kind of hard to say, oh, this will make them even stronger, because they're really strong right now. And the raid size isn't increasing. If it did, that would just only play to the Druid strengths, because they could just blanket. You know, if Numbergone was a 20-man raid, they could just blanket everybody. But it being 10-man with Wild Growth just hitting half the raid, with Trink being able to hit half the raid, Druid is just in a really good spot. So let me see. As far as tiering them, what I would do is this, strictly because I think Druids, one, are more mana efficient than mages and shamans. 2, they can do things that these 2 classes can't. They can heal single target like these 2 classes, and they can blanket everybody. Technically, the mage can blanket everybody too, but it takes a lot more footwork to get that going. Where shamans are just doing rejuve tab, rejuve tab, rejuve tab, rejuve tab. So if they gave us Tree Form, we would be. Oh yeah, if you got Tree Form as a rune, you definitely need that. What was it? It was like a 30% slow. Like you move like at 70% speed instead of 100%. Yeah, I definitely would need that. I don't think Tree Form has room for vanilla. Like I don't even think the especially leveling up. Like there's no way in hell is there gonna be a level up raid that's gonna require things like Tree Form or Avenging Wrath as a rune. That's another one I see floating around. Like, oh, we're gonna get Avenging Wrath as a rune. Like if they get Avenging Wrath, as Paladins get Avenging Wrath, that's like kind of crazy. Like, here's what you got to understand about like these level up raids, is at least what I'm understanding. Let's assume that all the next 2 phases, the 50, well, not the next 2, because the next phase after phase 2, so phase 3. Let's assume that whatever happens in phase 3, whatever raid is in phase 3 for the 50 bracket, let's say it's a 10-man as well. Hell, let's even say going into phase 4, the first raid at level 60 is a 10-man. Like I guess you have was it Upper Blackrock Spire? That one. Let's say the next couple of raids we have are 10-mans. 10-man raids, you have to cap the difficulty. They're capped innately. There's a 10-man can't be on the same difficulty level as a 20 or a 40-man raid, because clearly you don't have the manpower and you don't have the resources. So 10-mans are always going to be capped at a certain power level. When you are giving classes runes, and I think Blizzard kind of messed this up a little bit with priests by giving them Penance, Serendipity, Prayer of Mending, and Power Barrier, in conjunction with Powered Shield. You had Priest, which had a way too high power level for a raid that didn't really match. It was way low on the power scale, and it's because it's a 10-man. 10-mans can't be more difficult than 20 or 40-mans. It's just impossible, because you don't have you can't bring all of the necessary resources. And if they were even half as difficult, you would see a lot of guilds saying, okay, Priest, mandatory. Doesn't even matter what the other healers do. Priest, mandatory, they can stop damage, right? Warlocks, mandatory. They take very little physical damage, best single target threat, right? Like Paladins, mandatory because they have the buffs. Hunters, mandatory because of Heart of the Lion. Like you would start seeing people do mandatory stuff, and Blizzard definitely doesn't want that stuff. They're still running with the bring the player, not the class motif. So You're never going to see a 10-man just skyrocket in difficulty. I think they learned their lesson with Kata. Hopefully, knock on wood. But judging by that, knowing that Nomergon's going to be a 10-man, the level 50 raid is probably going to be a 10-man, you can kind of roundabout way guess what runes are going to be in place. And I think Treeform is way too strong in a 10-man setting. If the raids are still going to be this easy relative to our power level, I think Avenging Wrath is way too strong relative to our power level. What's another one? I'm trying to think. What's another one that's just like an egregious power creep? I don't know, but you get the point. I don't have to harp on it too much. But when it comes to Druid, yeah, I think I would put them, if not at Platinum with no features, at the top of all around decent. But I can make a argument that they would go here right next to Priest, because yes, they can't stop damage like a Priest can, but they can blanket it. They can effectively heal a larger amount of people than the other preceding healers, right? So like a mage can do the same thing. Again, a little bit more groundwork when it comes to a mage, a little bit more. Yes, they have mass regeneration, so they can use that to their advantage. Mass regeneration is a lot of mana. And if there is no corresponding rune that like makes arcane power the inverse, instead of things costing more mana, it doesn't cost more mana. It costs like 30% less mana. If there's no inverse rune for that, and now you have arcane power making you spend 30% more mana, and then you have mass regeneration, which is costing a hell of a lot more mana than regular regeneration, you're gonna be mana starved. And yes, you get evocation. Yes, you get you can invest all of the talent points into arcane meditation. You're still not as mana efficient as a druid. It's just the reality of the situation. So I think I would be comfortable putting druids either at the top of all around decent or at the bottom of platinum no features. Let's talk rogue tanks, which I definitely think was the underdog tank going into phase 1 Season of Discovery, because rogue tanks for a lot of people came out of left field, kind of like arcane healers. Sorry, like no one directly asked for arcane healers, and I don't think the rogue community was clamming for rogue tanks. I don't think that was the thing. I'm happy that they're here. I just don't think that people were like specifically looking for it. But anyway, going into Season of Discovery, I think rogues kind of had an uphill battle. Number one, Warlocks and Shamans were definitely the most popular tanks going into it, and they had a wider toolkit than Rogues. Number two, Paladins got a full like facelift, right? They weren't the same Paladins that they were from 2019 vanilla and Season of Mastery vanilla, right? Warriors still exist. The Warriors still are pretty good, and they're getting runes to supplement their power. So like the question with Rogues is, why would you bring a Rogue, and what do they benefit from? What's their strengths, what their weaknesses? The strength of a Rogue is they have a lot of avoidance. Right? They have a lot of avoidance. Where's my rogue? I'm just like losing all of my my talent bills that I had set aside, but we're gonna get there. Anyway. So rogues have a lot of avoidance, right? That's like their claim to fame. So when we see here, let's just I'll just do the quick like level 25 joint. This is kind of like generic rogue tanking. You get 5 out of 5 lightning reflexes, 5 out of 5 parry, you get repost, you get endurance, you get precision. Obviously, you can swap some of the stuff around. You don't really need endurance. You can go into here and get malice to increase your critical strike. I've seen rogues do that. I've seen assassination rogues where they want all of the damage dealing talents in the assassination tree, but still operate with tanking runes, right? But that's rogues really claim to fame, is the avoidance. Now, when we go to the 40 bracket, let's just throw some talent points in. I don't know what rogues build, but I'm just gonna take a swing at it. Okay. So looking at what rogues are getting for power, I think the number one thing is Blade Flurry, right? Because as of right now, rogues don't have the ability to AoE tank, right? They have no AoE ability, no ability in the rogue toolkit that hits more than one target. Their main thing, they can tab and Saber Lash, or they can tab and Sinister Strike, and they can use Engineering Bombs. That's how they do AoE threat. Tab hitting and then Engineering Bombs. So Blade Flurry is definitely a welcome ability. even if it is on a 2-minute cooldown. For rune speculation, I definitely see a rune where it reduces the cooldown on Blade Flurry. Maybe it reduces the power too, right? Like maybe it reduces the instead of getting 20% attack speed, you get like 5% attack speed, but it reduces the cooldown by like 90 seconds. I could see that. That would be pretty good for rogues, right? So Blade Flurry is definitely one that's going to help put a pretty good band-aid on their AoE tanking. Adrenaline Rush is a really good single target threat generator. It's a long cooldown, it's 5 minutes, but it increases your energy regeneration by 100%. So this is really good for single target. And rogues they really didn't slouch with single target. They weren't as good as warlocks, but they weren't bad. They're really good at single target, especially if you're taking the more threat-centric style talents like in the assassination tree. So they're not bad. The concern with rogue is this: I think their weaknesses kind of overplayed their strengths for phase 1, despite the fact that BFD wasn't that hard anyway. But yeah, when you have a high avoidance tank, like a tank that just is built, its bread and butter is on avoidance, but then you have like a boss like Baron Aquanus, who does not melee at all and just does magic damage. Like if BFD was a harder raid, Baron Aquanus will be slapping rogues because there will be nothing they can do. They're just going to take the upfront frost damage. And the only way to avoid that is 2 ways, actually. Either A, go get some frost resistant gear, or B, just have a lot of stamina. And at that point, you can just go get another tank that has more stamina than rogues can offer, right? So that's number 1. That's weakness number 1. When it comes to fights like that where it's either purely magic or majority magic, rogues kind of falter because you can't dodge a cast. It is what it is, right? Number 2 is that if a rogue gets stunned, they can't, like if you don't know tanking, when you're stunned, you can't dodge or parry. Attacks can still miss you, like the boss can actually miss you if you're stunned, but you cannot dodge, you cannot parry, you cannot block if you're stunned. So when a rogue becomes stunned, they're effectively defensiveless, right? And that makes it, and what makes that worse is rogues wear leather. They never get an increase, right? They never go up to mail, right? That would be kind of a crazy rune too. A rune that allows rogues to wear mail. That would be a crazy rune too. But anyway, they never get an armor increase. Their rune that they use for tanking doesn't increase their armor. It increases what it does is it reduces their physical damage by 20%, which isn't bad. That's not a bad reduction. A 20% DR on physical damage is pretty good. The problem is it doesn't scale. There's nothing to scale off of. Like as an example, Metamorphosis increases your armor by 500%. That means for every item that I get that's, better than my level 25 stuff, Obis is going to have more armor. It's going to scale up. I'm going to get more armor from that. Now, armor has DR on it, and that's one thing you could say, like, all right, at least with just a flesh wound, there's no diminishing return on a flat damage reduction, right? There's diminishing returns on armor, but not flat damage reduction, so I guess you could say that, but there's also no scaling with flat damage reduction. You're just always going to take that 20%. So at any point, if any one of these leveling raids, whether it be Nomergon or in any future raids that we get, if they start slapping tanks, rogues might come at a disadvantage if they can't dodge or parry. So that's something that you have to look out for. So we talked about not increasing their armor profile. They don't have any stamina modifiers, not in their trees, not in their talent tree, or actually, you know what? I think there might be one stamina modifier in their talent tree. Hold up. Or maybe I'm thinking of later iterations of Rogue. But I know innately they don't have any shapeshift forms or anything like that increases their stamina, armor, or anything of the such. So when you have a tank like that and you're just living and dying by your avoidance, you kind of get put into a niche role. Now, when that niche is filled, rogues are great. I'll go back to my crowd pummeler theory. I think that's going to be the patchwork fight. I think rogues are going to excel. If he's doing primarily or 90, if he's just doing, let's say he's exactly like patchwork, where he does a lot of upfront damage to the main tank and he has a hateful strike ability. Rogues are going to be great in any one of those positions. They're going to be great at taking hatefuls because they're going to be able to parry and dodge all of them, and they generate really good threats. So you don't have to worry about like a warrior is really bad in that position because they have a harder time generating rage when they're not being attacked. That's a little bit better now because they have Blood Frenzy, which is the rune that every time a target bleeds, They generate rage. Speaking of which, I mentioned this in my in one of my streams. I can't remember which stream, but speaking of which, that is gonna put rogues at a disadvantage. The bleeds, the poison damage, because Nomergon is a machine raid. There's mad machine mobs in Nomergon. Machine mobs can't bleed and they can't be poisoned. Rogues do a lot of damage through bleeds and poisons. So when you have that kind of tank, it might be a little bit harder on their single target threat. Obviously, they still hit hard. Like, they're still going to hit hard with their physical abilities, but they're not going to be able to do the upfront damage, which is another reason why I think Warlocks are going to excel. All that damage is magic. So unless we have like a situation where the mobs just have high spell resistances, like what we saw with the Dream Phase ads and Kelris, Warlocks are just going to be the best. But yeah, you have bosses that you can't rupture, poisons won't work. So they might be in a little bit of a tighter spot when it comes to single target. I still think they're going to be good for any fight that just does primarily physical damage, like what I'm thinking Crowd Pummeler's going to do. So I think they're going to be in a good spot regardless to their shortcomings for not being able to bleed a target or not being able to poison a target. If anything, what that means is they probably won't use they probably won't use Saber Lash because you won't be able to benefit from that bleed effect. And Sinister Strike does more damage than Saber Lash. It's just the fact that Saber Lash has a bleed effect attached to it, which makes it do more damage over time. So, but if you can't bleed something, you might as well just use Sinister Strike and keep it pushing. But in this case, yeah, I think they would just use Mangosh. Mangosh is going to give them 10% more parry and hopefully shore up the lack of not being able to poison their target. But when it comes to strength of their talents, like I said, Blade Flurry is definitely going to be a pretty good talent. Weapon expertise, I don't know how I feel about this. I was actually talking to a rogue player, and the way he was describing it is that if you play a human rogue, then you probably wouldn't put 2 talent points in weapon expertise because you're already getting the ratio and you really don't need the 2. You only need 1. And if you have, because apparently rogues just have a lot of talents that help their weapon damage and stuff like that. So, I mean, or they had a lot of talents. I think, what is this? This is sword specialization. So if you have the ratio from humans, you have short specialization, Jesus Christ, and you have weapon expertise, you really don't need 2 points in here, so I kind of messed up that. But depending on the kind of weapons that comes out of Nomergon, is definitely going to help the rogue as well. And when you look at their talents, pardon me, not talents, I'm bugging. When you look at their abilities that they get, I don't think it's not too much power creep here. Yes, they get higher ranks of Eviscerate, which is going to be really good. They do get access to deadly poison, but again, we're going to Nomergon where a lot of the mobs are probably not going to be able to be poisoned, or a lot of the bosses, I should say, not mobs, but a lot of the bosses are probably not going to be able to be poisoned. So if we want to just do a head count real quick, let me see. That's Wrath. Let's go classic. Nomergon zone. So if Blizzard keeps to the standard and uses this list, these 6 bosses. So Grubbus is a humanoid, so they're okay there. Viscous Fallout is an elemental, which I don't think you can bleed elementals either, to be quite honest with you. I don't think you can bleed elementals. I might be wrong in that, but I don't know if you can bleed elementals. Somebody might correct me on that one. I'm pretty sure I've leveled a warrior and I tried to render an elemental and it did not work. But I don't think you can bleed elementals. So we'll put an asterisk next to the Viscous Fallout. I don't know. Electrocution to 6000 mechanical, can be bleed or poisoned. Crowd Pummeler is a mechanical, can be bleed or poisoned. Dark Ambassador is a humanoid. This is a rare elite, so I don't know if they would make him a boss. I feel like they would, though. But he's a humanoid, so they're safe there. And then we have Mechgineer Thermoplug, a mechanical. So out of 6 bosses, you have 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. Maybe 4 bosses that you can't use your full toolkit. That doesn't really spell good news for a rogue. Defensively, might be pretty okay, right? The Electrocutioner is probably going to be the Electrocutioner is probably going to be an ad-centric fight. I can see the Electrocutioner be a fight where there's a lot of ads, and there's like a primary ad, and then you deal with, or not primary ad, you deal with the primary boss, and then you deal with the ads. Rogues might be really good boss tanks there. Crowd Pummeler, we already spoke about. I think Rogues are going to be pretty good if they make it to a Padrook style fight. the final boss, he can go either way. He could be an ad fight. He can be something like Akumai, where he has not a lot, but he has his own mechanics that's not really centric to ads. Like the ads is more so an afterthought. He could be a tank buster straight up. Like I think there's like the verdict is still out on Thermoplug, but yeah, when you have 3, arguably 4 out of the 6 potential bosses that you straight up can't bleed and poison, it might be a long night for the rogues. So getting deadly poison, I don't really see as a buff in this case. If it was any other raid, probably, right? Like if they picked Scarlet Monastery as the level up raid, then rogues would be fine. There's a whole bunch of humanoids in there. They would be fine. But in this case, for Gnomeregan, I don't know how they're gonna fare. I don't think there's a lot of power here when it comes to their abilities. I think a lot of the rogue power comes from their talents, for sure. So looking at their talents, and they do have pretty decent talents. So if most of their power comes from the talents and they have good talents, then I think that goes hand in hand with rogues being okay. But as far as tearing them is concerned, just by the nature of Gnomeregan having a lot of trash and rogues not being the best AoE tank, having a lot of mechanical mobs, meaning you can't poison and you can't bleed, I might have to reserve the rogues to either needing a buff or just playing with your friends, to be quite honest with you. They do have a lot of good, strong talents. Nothing that really affects the group, which kind of hurts them in my opinion. Like at least druids get leader of the pack, stuff like that. So, and they get wild strikes and stuff like that. But maybe this might be a play with friends thing. I don't think they need a buff necessarily. And if they do, and the buff would have to come in the form of a really good rune, right? I think rogues are going to live and die definitely on the type of runes that they get. So we'll see, but I'm going to reserve them to the playing with friends category here. Whew, we almost here. This is a long one. We almost there, though. We almost there. Stay with me. We almost done. Let's do Holy Paladin. So Holy Paladin, I think, is probably the most unsung healer. I think my entire time in phase 1, I've seen 2 Holy Paladins. 2. So, pardon me. Now, I could be in the minority there, but I pugged a lot. In the beginning. I slowed down definitely as we got closer to phase 2, but I pugged a lot in the beginning, and I've only ever saw 2 Holy Paladins, and one of which is a friend in the guild. So I've only ever really pugged, like fully pugged with 1 Holy Paladin. So Holy Paladin is definitely the like unsung healer in my opinion for coming from phase 1. Yeah, shut up, Atreyu. But speaking about their power coming from phase 1 and going into phase 2, let's pull up the talent tree here. So when it comes to their talents, I don't think Holy Paladin necessarily has bad talents. I just think they could be stronger. And that's just by virtue of their hybridness. Like a lot of hybrid classes tend to have like varying levels of power when it comes to their talents. Like I said, I don't think Holy Paladins have bad talents. I just think they could be a little bit stronger. So let's max them out real quick. Let's do this. Let's just put some talent points in, throw some talents in here. Don't mind me. Messed up. There we go. Realistically, I wouldn't do that, but you guys get it by now. So, looking at their straight up abilities that they're getting on the level up, I think the most important things that they're getting via level up is just the higher ranks in their buffing toolkit. So, I guess you know what? I'll backtrack that a little bit. I'll backtrack that a little bit and say they do get access to Divine Intervention at level 30, which obviously can save a wipe, has varying degrees of usefulness, but it's still there when you need it. So Divine Intervention is definitely something, and honestly, Divine Intervention can even be used depending on how these fights go. Divine Intervention can be used to like pseudo immune things that a person wouldn't naturally be able to immune. Kind of like if you play Wrath Classic, right, and you're fighting What's the guy's name? The fourth boss in ICC, Sarfang, right? Like a popular strat before, like we got like 20% increased health and damage. A popular strat was after a certain amount of Marks of the Fallen Crusader he put out, you would just divine intervention that person and give them a pseudo immunity, so he's no longer affected by it. So something like that. I could see something like that kind of taking effect. Maybe not at level 40. Like I feel like that's a little bit of things like that are a little bit above Nomergon's pay grade, but you kind of get the implications as we level up, right? But yeah, I think most of the power for level up for Paladins, for Holy Paladin, comes from their power in their higher rank. So they're getting rank 3 of Blessing of Wisdom, right? They're getting Blessing of Salvation, which is going to help. Definitely going to help some people out, right? They're getting Seal of Wisdom, which is definitely going to help, right? They're getting, where is it? I just saw it. Yeah, they're getting higher ranks in some of their auras, like Shadow Resist aura. Even though I don't think Nomergon, I said this on the Shaman one. I think if there's ever going to be like just like haphazard damage, it's probably going to be nature, and that's probably going to be covered by a nature resist totem. So you're probably not going to see too much use out of Shadow Resist, or especially since we just came from a pretty much shadow themed raid, right? Black Fathom Depths, there's a lot of shadow damage in there, so I don't think they're going to double down on that one. They get their first rank of Divine Shield, which is like, I guess you would call it like the quote unquote true bubble, if you want to call it that, right? So yeah, a lot of their power comes from just naturally getting higher ranks in their abilities, not so much getting a new ability, right? Also, I think Paladin, Holy Paladin specifically, is another spec that's going to maybe not live or die, but definitely be heavily judged on the type of runes that they get. As we all know, Paladins really excel at single target healing. They really kind of falter at AoE healing, but that really only comes into play if there's a lot of AoE healing to be done and the size of the raid. We already know the size of the raid. It's 10 man. So having a wide AoE healing arsenal doesn't really matter too much in 10 man, unless you have certain things like a chain heal that only hits a certain amount of people, right? But healing rain, if we got the old version of healing rain, or not old version, but retail version of healing rain, it really wouldn't matter in the 10 man, right? It really wouldn't matter too much in the 10 man. But chain heal gets a lot of value. Wild growth gets a lot of value. So I think Paladins need something. Maybe they get Light of Dawn, which I could definitely see being a rune. I could definitely see Light of Dawn being a rune for Holy Paladin. And if they get Light of Dawn, definitely think that happens. As I said before, I don't think they're getting Avenging Wrath. I don't think that's going to happen until way later. Like, not at 40. If they get Avenging Wrath, that happens later. That doesn't happen at level 40 bracket. Not for Nomergon 10 man. Like, Avenging Wrath, no way. I feel the same way. I feel the same way about Avenging Wrath that I felt about Tree Form. Too strong for the current power scaling. But I think I can definitely see Light of Dawn being a rune that they get. And if you don't know what Light of Dawn is, believe that came in Cataclysm. Yeah, that's the it's an ability that heals, I think, like 5 people in a 12-yard frontal cone of the Paladin, which would be perfect for a Season of Discovery, because Light of Dawn really wasn't that strong of an ability, but it helped the Paladins do something when AoE healing was happening. So I think Light of Dawn definitely is a shoo-in for a rune. When it comes to their capstone talent, like, Holy Shock is cool. Like, it's definitely not a bad talent. It definitely makes them gives them a little bit of mobility when you got to move and you want to do something. You can cast a Holy Shock. I could even see, this might be a stretch. But I'm gonna say it anyway, and I'm gonna roll the dice on it. I could even see some version, maybe not the retail version, but some version of Glimmer of Light making its way to Season of Discovery. And if you don't know what Glimmer of Light is, basically it's a talent. Well, it was a what is it? It started out as a Azerite power, actually. It started as an Azerite power in BFA. And when you Holy Shock someone, you left a little buff on them for 30 seconds. And every time you Holy Shock another person or a target or even them, it would just heal them. So it was kind of like leaving mini beacons on people. So, like, as an example, if I'm a Holy Paladin and I Holy Shock Tank 1, that puts a Glimmer of Light on them. And then I Holy Shock Tank 2, that puts a Glimmer of Light on them. And then I Holy Shock myself, Now I'm getting healed, and the 2 people that I just hit Holy Shock with get healed. I could see Glimmer kind of being a thing. Like I said, it would have to be at a reduced power level, maybe a lower duration, because I think Glimmer of Light lasts like 30 seconds now. I don't think it should last 30 seconds in Season of Discovery, maybe like 15. But I could see some version of Glimmer of Light making its way to Season of Discovery for Holy Paladin. But when it comes back to their talents and their abilities, I think it's hard to say, because you don't really, if you buff Paladins too much, they become the most efficient healer, because Flash of Light is a really efficient spell, especially in a 10-man setting where, like, when the number count is low, Flash of Light can heal a lot of people in rapid succession, right? It can't heal more than one person at a time, but it can heal a lot of people in like a small time frame, and it can heal them for very meaningful healing. It's not low healing. So it's hard to say that they need a buff, right? Because when you buff them, they become like out of the park, out of here, right? I think they need a buff in the way of runes, and I should have added a category for that. Wait to see what runes they get, but I didn't want to lean on the crutch of always saying wait to see what runes they get. But I think Paladin is a spec. Holy Paladin specifically is a spec where you gotta really wait to see what runes they get, because innately they still do their job pretty well. Their job of single target healing, they still do it pretty well. And because Gnomeregan's a 10-man, because they're getting access to Holy Shock, because they're getting access to Holy Power, not the actual resource Holy Power, the talent Holy Power. They're getting things like Seal of Wisdom. They're getting Illumination, like the max value Illumination, which is gonna do wonders for their mana regen. Holy Paladin is looking to be. I feel like they'd be a sleeper pick. I'll say that. I think they'll be a sleeper pick. So with that being said, I'm going to leave them in the needs a buff category, because again, I've seen one Holy Paladin pug that I didn't know personally. And I'm not saying just because I've only seen that one means they're bad, but it definitely means that there's a disparity between Holy Paladins and the other healers. So I'll put them in the needs a buff category, and that buff could just come in the way of runes. So yeah, I'll put Paladins in the needs a buff category. And last but not least, we have the Brown Boys, the Prot Warriors. And Prot Warrior, honestly, their power creep is going to be pretty good too. Let's talk about it. So this is the Paladin. Let's go to Warrior. So with the Prot Warrior, they get a combination of good abilities on the level up and good access to good talents on the level up. So they kind of benefit on both ends of that spectrum. So let's just put some talents in so we can see what they get at 40. And we can go on from there. Just run down here. Run down. Boom. Easy clap. So most notably for a tank, Warriors get Shield Wall. The best defensive in the game. Reducing your damage taken by 75%. Nothing even comes remotely close to having this cooldown. And it doesn't come with really any drawback, right? The only thing is you have to be in defensive stance. Other than that, Shield Wall is the strongest defensive in the game, right? And having access to Shield Wall will really, so it's kind of like the same thing I said with Warlock, right? The Soul Link build is really, really strong, but the value you get from it depends on how hard Gnomeregan is. Shield Wall is a really strong defensive. The value you get from it depends on how hard Gnomeregan is. If things really just aren't threatening for you, you're probably not going to use Shield Wall too often. You're just going to use Last Stand and keep it moving. If things are threatening, Shield Wall gets an increase in value. So that's where I'll put Shield Wall at. It's a really good ability, obviously, but the value you get from it is determined on the raid. They also get access to Shield Slam, which I know it's a talent down here. I mean, it's an ability down here, but it's definitely a talent. And Shield Slam is going to allow a couple things. One, it's going to allow It's going to allow warriors to generate a lot of single target threat, because Shield Slam is a really good threat generator. It has its own threat modifier. It's going to allow warriors to potentially, where is it? Which rune is it? in, not this one, not that one. Where is it? Here it is. This one. It's going to potentially allow warriors to drop Raging Blow. So right now, Raging Blow is the primary single target threat generator for Prot Warriors. But when we get Shield Slam, they can probably drop Raging Blow and get things like Flagellation, or maybe just keep Blood Frenzy in that pocket, or maybe use Warbringer. So it gives them a lot more flexibility into not using Raging Blow. So I think personally, this probably opens up the door for them to use Flagellation a little bit more comfortably, right? So if you have Flagellation and now you can use the Flagellation buff with Shield Slam, like you really got a recipe for a lot of single target threat. So hold on one second, I thought I heard something. Anyway, so Shield Slam is definitely a very important talent to have. They also get Intercept, which I would have said is a big deal if Warbringer wasn't a thing. Intercept's still pretty good, but Warbringer's a thing now, so it's like, especially now that we have Shield Slam, we can use Warbringer. It means we can use Charge, which means we can generate Rage with the Gap Closer instead of costing Rage with the Gap Closer, so that's really good. They get a higher rank of Thunderclap, which is just going to feed their Furious Thunder. They get Whirlwind, things like that. So when it comes to Warrior, like I said, I think they benefit from both talents and strong talents like Shield Slam and strong abilities like Shield Wall. And the value you get from these talents and abilities just determines on how hard or easy Gnomeregan is. Another thing Warriors get is they get access to plate gear. Now, plate at the level 40 bracket, plate really isn't that abundant. So I don't know if you're going to be able to just fully kit yourself out in all plate gear. You're probably still going to have a few mail pieces. But having access to that higher armor threshold is just going to improve your survivability. So that's really going to help you out there. And not that it's probably not going to be too much of a I don't know how that happened again. But anyway, my bad. I had to reconnect that. I don't know how that happened again. But there is an argument, back to what I was saying about the shield thing, there is an argument that depending on the weapons that we get from Gnomeregan and whatever, like any level up stuff, like the Whirlwind Axe, there is an argument that you could two-hand tank some stuff. There is an argument. I know Prot Paladins do it right now with BFD. So depending on your talent setup, depending on how much plate gear you have, depending on your weapons that you get, you could arguably two-hand tank, which is an exciting prospect. Like a lot of people who tank also want to push their damage meters, so and push their parses and stuff like that, which is fine. Like, you know what I mean? So what I'm saying is that there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to Warriors, which was kind of always the Warrior thing. Like Warriors were always like not always, but in the earlier days, they were pretty much jacks of all trades when it came to the tanking thing, right? They weren't the best at it, but they were the best tank default because they had the best defensive cooldown and they had like just the best defensive profile and talents and stuff like that. But they weren't like the best single target threat tank. They weren't the best AoE threat tank. They could dabble in both areas, but they weren't the best in either. But this just provides more flexibility to their tanking profile. So when it comes to where I would tier them at, I think all around decent. Like all around decent. They do pretty good for like they have a weakness in AoE tanking, I will say that. Like you kind of have to get the right talents and get the right runes to really, really pump some AoE threat. And even then, you're still not as good as a Paladin. You're still not as good as a Shaman. But they still can do it. And when it comes to single target threat, yeah, they're not as good as a Warlock. You know, they are not as good as a Druid if Druid didn't have rage issues, which, I mean, I guess effectively makes them better than Druids. But they're still just decent, right? They're just decent tanks. And if Gnomeregan's a difficult raid and Shield Wall gets, used to more value, that just bumps them up because they're really the only tank with really good defensives, Last Stand and Shield Wall. No other tank has really any defensive cooldowns. So, and innately, warriors are as tanky as all of the other tanks without the cooldown. So when you add on high value cooldowns like Last Stand and Shield Wall, you get the recipe for a great tank. So only time will tell on how difficult Nomergon is, the gear drops, things of that nature, so on and so forth. But I think warriors are just all around decent. Now, if you missed earlier in the stream, you might be saying, all right, he still has to do Holy Priest. I spoke about Holy Priest when I did Dis Priest, and what I said was, it's kind of hard to say you're a straight up Holy Priest because you're still going to be using Penance and Prayer of Mending. You're still going to be relying on not holy centric things. Even if you spec primarily into the Holy Tree, which I don't know how popular that's going to be because the Dis Tree just has powerful buffs, right? Like they have improved power word fortitude, they have power infusion, they have divine spirit, they have the meditation talent. So there's a lot of important talents in the Dis Tree. I don't know if speccing fully holy is even going to matter at the level 40 bracket, maybe later on. So that's why I said if you really want to take a look at it, holy, you can kind of look at holy in the same spot as disc, but if you are like a diehard, I only put all of my talents in the holy tree, I don't believe in penance and stuff like that. If I'm just straight up looking at like if you're a priest basically who's only using serendipity, circle of healing, and prayer of mending, right? You're that style of healer, probably go into Pug Chimps category. Because at that point you're just like a less efficient, maybe not less of, yeah, I would say like a less efficient quote unquote Resto Druid at that point. So that being said, that's where I'll put the Holy Priest, like the diehard. I only put talent points in the Holy Tree type of person. Pug Chimps, Holy Priests are easy to fit in the Pug. They give fort still, even without the improved talent. They still give fort. They still can do spread and single target healing. It's easy to slot them in. Pug Chimps all the way through. You are out of your mind if you think druids should wear mail. Imagine a druid. Imagine a guardian druid or a druid tank who already gets what, a 5 times modifier on armor wearing mail. Yeah, out of your mind. Out of your goddamn mind. But this is the tier list. This is the speculative tier list for Nomergon in Phase 2. Obviously, you don't have to agree with any of this, right? And even looking at it now, there are some things that I could slot up and slot down. I think when it comes to like the needs above category, I don't think these tunes are necessarily bad. Like you could have a bear, you could have a holy paladin and be 1,000% fine. Maybe even better in some spots than what you would having a warlock, right? Just by virtue of the buffs that these guys bring. I do think still though, they kind of are the lackluster ones from Phase 1, and going into Phase 2, I think they could use a little bit of a push. When it comes to rogues, you could argue that rogues can become Pug Chimps just by, actually, I don't know if they become Pug Chimps, because rogues are kind of hard to slot in because even with Blade Flurry, they still aren't the best at AoE tanking, and I'm pretty sure, like I said, Nomergon's going to have a lot of trash or trash-centric fights, and a lot of the bosses in Nomergon can't be poisoned and can't be bled, so that just diminishes the rogue's power a lot. So rogues might be the play with friends one. Even the warrior, you can kind of say warrior hurts. Like blood frenzy really won't be a thing for a lot of the fights because you can't rend, you can't deep wounds, so it kind of diminishes the power. But because they're getting shield slam, it kind of puts a band-aid over that, right? Because they're getting shield slam, and realistically they could use shield slam and blood frenzy, raging blow, and just scrap blood frenzy and be fine. Like, now that's going to have major implications on their rage generation, but for their threat it'd be okay. So I think when it comes to these guys, comes to the bleed boys, I think rogues are kind of low-key kind of fucked, but runes can sway things drastically. So maybe I'll do another like quick tier list. I won't do it like such a drawn out one. I'll do it like a quick tier once we know what runes are coming out, and I'll be like, all right, now that I know the runes are coming out, I'm gonna update this. That'll probably be like a video where I'll like move around some stuff. But for right now, for what we know about Nomergon, or for the lack of what we know about Nomergon, This, I think I'm pretty comfortable with putting a stamp on speculatively. Not definitive, not saying this is it, this is what you got to do. You got to have a Warlock. I'm not saying any of that. But I think for speculation, I think this is it. I'm trying to think any last minute things about the healers. I would argue that mages can jump to platinum with no features. They're getting a lot of important talents. So yeah, I think that's probably the one change I would do with even with them being kind of mana heavy. I think having full access to arcane meditation. I think having access to arcane meditation bumps them up for me. Having arcane power bumps them up for me. Having mage armor, but yeah, I think I'll put them up. Yeah, I'll move them up. Large dog. Resto Druid is top dog killer by far after priest nerf. I could see that. The only problem is BFD is so easy, it diminishes the value on shields. So honestly, it diminishes the value on hots too. Like, I want to see how those nerfs carry over into Nomergon. Same healing in 4 times. What do you mean 4 times? What do you mean 4 times the damage? I don't know what that second part means. But I would want to see what Nomergon does for priests, because you know what? Let me just bring it up while we're talking about this. Let me find that hot fix that they did. Let me see. It should be easy to find. It wasn't that long ago that they did that. Let me see. Where is it? Pre-shadow. Nope, that's Shadow or Death. That's not what I'm looking for. Nope, that's not it. It really wasn't that long ago, was it? Was it that long ago when they nerfed them? Let me see. Mana regeneration. Nope, that's Shaman, that's Rogue, that's Paladin, that's Mage. Was it really that long ago? Hold on. Maybe I'm looking at this wrong. Oh yeah, no, I am looking at the wrong thing. Hold up. Yeah. All right. That's why I couldn't find it. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Let me see. Classic. You all open up the link. Let's see. Here it is. Okay. So, priests. Base healing done by runes reduced by 20%. So, this adjustment will apply to prayer, mending, penance, and circle of healing. A base healing aura modifier by 20%. Let me see. Resto Druid, they just nuke between heals for decent damage, where I'm just spam healing the whole rate as a priest. Was the same as a hunter. Like, yeah, no, hunters were egregious. Yeah, hunters were crazy. Hunters were pretty egregious. But let me move this so I can show you what I'm actually looking at. Oh nope, that's not what I'm looking at. This is what I'm looking at. So this was what they did on. It was January 11th. It was that long ago. Wow, I felt like they did that like yesterday. It's kind of crazy. But so this is what I'm looking at. This is just the nerfs that they did from January 11th. So a base healing to prayer of mending, penance, and circle of healing by 20%. Because it's base, that doesn't really mean too much when you level up to 40. We're getting 15 extra levels. So it hurts now because we don't even have a lot of stats. And you can argue that it hurts even more later on because the more stats you have, the more this reduction matters. So I can understand that. But I really think that this isn't going to matter unless the damage, like we got to see the damage profile that Nomergon has. Right now, barely anything happens in Black Fathom Depths. There's really nothing that's dangerous in Black Fathom Depths. Aside from just consistently standing in Gelahast mobs on his intermission. But there's really nothing that happens in Black Fathom Depths that's I would consider dangerous. And even the pseudo dangerous things, like as an example, when people don't kill the totem on Lorgus Jet and they're just like slapping themselves up with that lightning thing. Like a priest, even with the nerf to Prayer of Mending and Prayer of Healing, a priest can just pre-shield everybody and stop a large part of that damage. You can't really copy that. Now, I will say this nerf definitely does make Wild Growth a stronger prospect than Prayer of Mending and Circle of Healing. I'll give him that. But going into phase 2, I would want to know how much that matters for Nomergon. Like, yeah, I would just want to see the damage profiles before I comfortably put druids over priests going into phase 2. I would have to see the damage profile. And I think that's like that for any healer, especially a healer that isn't really getting too much on the forefront in terms of ability wise. They're getting a lot of strong talents, but so is priest, right? Mage, I think, comes out the best in terms of strength in their talents. I think they have a lot stronger talents than the other healers. I would just have to see what runes they get, and again with the damage profiles in Nomergon. But I could see it if this was a phase 1 thing. If this was like a end of phase 1 retrospect on what classes made it to top, yeah, you put Druid up there, easy clap. After the nerf, yeah, easy clap. But because I don't know what's happening in phase 2. In terms of what the fights look like in Nomergon, and I don't know what runes all the healers are getting, I can't comfortably put Druid over it and going into phase 2. There's an argument for it. I'm not saying priests are end all be all better. Definitely an argument for it. Definitely room for discussion, but I can't comfortably do it. That's another problem too. Shields is a lot of mana. Yeah, I think Druid is the most mana efficient healer in my opinion. I don't know. People might feel differently about that one. But yeah, you know what? Yeah, but I think this is where I would have it at. I would leave this comfortably. I think the only thing I moved Mage from top of all around decent to bottom of platinum with no features, because I think Mage is just getting really access to really strong talents. So yeah, but that is it, guys. I did this for 2 hours straight. I know there was some hiccups. in the stream. I apologize about that. I'm trying to make sure I figure out the problem there and get it corrected. But if you stuck with me doing this during this whole time, I appreciate you. I don't know if I'm gonna do a melee and ranged like tier list. I'll put up a poll and see if people want to see that. I don't know. I'm not too interested in the DPS ones because, as we saw with the hot fixes, like DPS, like they like Blizzard is not scared to nerf or buff, which can swing like the DPS profiles pretty drastically. You know what I mean? Like how many times did they change or nerf or like supplement buff hunters? You know what I mean? So it's like it swings them drastically. Like they nerfed like I know Arcane isn't a DPS, but if you are playing Arcane as DPS, like they nerfed like the Arcane stuff off the rip, right? So I would be kind of a little bit more cautious when I'm doing like range and DPS tier list, because one hot fix can change your opinion like that. So I would be a little bit more cautious if I did do that. So that's why I kind of shy away from ranged and melee DPS tier list. But who knows, if there's enough interest, I'll get my notes together and do it. But that's really it. I'm actually excited. What I am going to do is I'm going to make sure I save this, like screenshot this and save this. And I'm going to come back to this. When the meta is defined, when people kind of feel comfortable with where things at, I want to see how much I got right and how much I got wrong. I should have did this with phase 1, but how much I got right and how much I got wrong. And we're going to see, maybe I'll update it and I'll move some things up or down. Like, oh, they buffed the shit out of Bear Druid. I should move them up. Or, hey, they nerfed the Warlocks, which I definitely think is going to happen. No way do I think they're going to let Warlocks come into Nomergon with a 30% passive DR, a 10% physical damage buff just for having the Woodwalker out, having access to sacrifice. There's no way in hell they're going to let Warlocks live on that hill. But who knows? Maybe they will. But like I said before, if you like what you saw, please consider liking and subscribing. We just made it to 800. We moving. Hopefully we make it to 1K and we keep the train pushing. But other than that, y'all been great. I've been Soul, and I'm out. Peace.